and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, and you don't climb into a T-180 to be a driver. You do it because you're driven.
And I'm Matt Freeman, and when I watch you do some of the things you do, it just takes my breath away.
Well, get it back, Matt, because we're going to need it, because we're back for a final episode of the Doofcast for 2018, and we're here to discuss movie number 5 in our continuing Wachowski Marathon, 2008's Speed Racer. For those of you that are just joining us for the first time, this is one of our continuing series where we really dive deep into each movie in a certain director's filmography and try to find out what makes them tick, why do they tell the stories they tell, and how they choose to tell them. And we're doing the Wachowski sisters. We've done the Matrix trilogy and their very first film, Bound, and we are now moving away from that part of their life and on to Speed Racer. So yeah, we're gonna talk all about. We're kind of in an interesting situation here, Matt, where we've talked about this movie before.
Yeah,
we did a whole episode on this movie for one of our old shows, the Kryptonian Collection, which was just like our show trying to decide what some of the best movies ever are. And I thought about like going back and listening to that show and then trying to do this thing where I don't repeat myself, but I decided not to do that because like then during the course of the conversation, I would be constantly thinking to myself, oh wait, I said that already. I shouldn't say that. And I think it would have just made the conversation really stilted and weird.
Yeah. I don't think there's too much danger of it anyway, really, because, what I'd like to focus on, at least when we have these discussions, is like really what is the influence of the director, right? Like we're not really going to talk much about the performances. We're not really going to talk much about the, did they write the script for this one actually?
They did.
They did. So we are going to talk about the script. We're going to talk about the visuals. We're going to talk about, I figure we're going to talk a lot about like the visual aspect and the style that they go for here.
Yeah, I don't think you can talk about this movie without talking about that.
Yeah, whereas I think in the previous discussion we talked about kind of a wider spread of things. So,
Sure. Yeah. So we're going to talk all about Speed Racer, and then we're going to wrap up the show with a little mini review from me of Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. That'll be a spoiler-free review, so don't worry if you haven't seen it. And then we're going to wrap up the year by talking a little bit about next year and what their plans are for the show and what we want and stuff we want to hear from you. So that's the episode this week. I'm really excited. So let's just jump into it. Let's not waste any time.
Your son seems to be interested in only one thing. All he talks about, all he seems capable of thinking about, is automobile racing.
Racing's everything. For my family, it isn't just a sport. It's way more important than that. It's like a religion.
Let's do it. So, Scott, would you say that you like this movie?
Matt, I would say that I love this movie. I would say that Speed Racer is on my list of favorite movies ever. I don't like keep like a actual numbered list, but it's definitely up there. I adore this movie. I love just about everything about it. So it's going to be very hard for me to talk about this movie in any kind of objective way, because I watched it this afternoon in preparation for this recording tonight for probably like the 100th time, and I got choked up at the ending again because that's just what happens when I watch this movie because I love it. So it's a good way to preface things going into it. I cannot be objective about this movie. I just can't.
Yeah, I think it's good to put that up front because like I hadn't seen this movie until you told me, admittedly quite a long time ago, like, hey, I love this movie. And I think there was another reviewer that we both like who also kind of raved about this movie, put it on the radar. And I really enjoy this movie, but I don't think I have the same level of outsize adoration for it that you do. But like, it's not because I have any particular problems with it. It's going to be interesting for us to talk about what works so well about it that makes you love it, because when it comes down to it, that's what I want to understand, right? Like, I want to understand, what did they do that was so good, that worked so well, that hooks into you, the way it does.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to say there. I want to talk about that too. Part of me wants to kind of speculate, and I try, like, we do some research going into these episodes, but I try to keep it like to a minimum, because I want my understanding of the Wachowskis as filmmakers to come from the films and not come from outside interviews and conversations with them, Right. Because I really want to just be learning about them as directors from the things that they've created. So I want to kind of explore why I think they decided to make this movie. Like this was coming off the Matrix trilogy. It was like a huge successful thing for them. And they said, okay, we're going to adapt a classic Japanese anime that's really silly. And that's what we're going to do next. And I really want to dive into like what I think they're saying through the film, and how is that reflected on their decision to tell this story.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good place to kind of dig in, because we're talking about them as directors, and obviously part of that is their evolution through time. And I think it's more than safe to say that Speed Racer is more different from the Matrix Revolutions than the Matrix is from Bound. Do you know what I mean? Like
I think you're right.
They were doing kind of a noir thing, then it became a noir sci-fi thing, then it became a sci-fi thing, and now it's Speed Racer.
It's a thing that is hard to classify like that. Speed Racer as a movie it's a sports movie. It's a live action adaptation of an anime. It's colors, it's sounds, it's ridiculous cameras, it's more computer graphics than you've ever seen in a movie. It's a story about family, it's a story about passion. It's so many different things. Like, you can't classify it, I think, with just one sentence like that.
Yeah.
And it is, when I look at it, I look at this as a movie made by people who are kind of frustrated with the Hollywood system.
Yeah.
That's I think that's the first thing I want to jump into with this, because
right.
They made Bound. It was this small tiny movie, but it got them on people's radars, and that turned into The Matrix, and then they went through this giant process with Warner Brothers through the Matrix trilogy, where I'm sure their initial vision of this thing was probably pushed against a little bit throughout the course of that. And I see this movie as people like frustrated by what filmmaking is. And you see a lot of that with how this movie tackles racing and the industry around racing and the business around racing cars. These people just want to get in a car and drive. They just want to sit behind a camera and shoot a movie. But there's so much pushing and pulling and ripping apart and destroying of good people that want to do that goes on in these industries.
Yeah. I think what you said about it being a sports movie is very accurate, because that is kind of, if you zoom out from the movie, the typical sports movie plot, or atypical sports movie plot, is you have your iconic sportsmen. They are put in a situation where there's an opportunity to sacrifice their integrity in order to win. And then the struggle is like an inner struggle of them mastering themselves and winning, despite the fact that they have refused to go along with the corrupt system, and indeed winning against the corrupt system. And that's a great timeless plot line. And there's more going on in the movie, certainly, but that is the bones of the story. And as you say, that does fit exactly onto this mapping of them as filmmakers and the system trying to corrupt them. And I don't know, maybe they feel like they did give in a little bit when it came to the Matrix sequels. Hard to say, right? But,
yeah. I mean, that's the feel I get from this movie, that they felt like there's very much this is a story of two brothers, right? The older brother tried to fight back against the system, and in his fighting back against the system, it let him destroy him. And then we have Speed, our main character, is the younger brother, and he kind of starts going down the same path, but he's able to break free of that cycle, and he does it through the strength of his familial bonds and the family and the people he surrounds himself with. That's how he's able to break the cycle that his brother started. And I see that as them kind of acknowledging the ways in which they feel that they failed. And again, we're kind of putting words into these women's mouths. Like, we haven't listened to interviews or anything. I'm just going off of what their movies say to me as I'm watching them. And it feels like, yeah, we might have compromised a little bit. We might have done this. We might have done that. And this is our attempt to kind of write that and make a movie that is pure, that is our vision. We're going to do what we want with it. And it's going to be a story of how you find love in the things that you do again, how you recapture the thing that made you want to get behind the car, the thing that made you want to get behind the camera, the thing that made you want to sit in front of that keyboard and write something or paint something or draw something. Like that to me is, when you boil down this movie to its essentials, it is finding the love in the thing you do and embracing that love and it being spectacular.
That brings up to me one of the most fascinating beats of this movie that occurs almost at the very end. And thus, you walk away from the movie remembering it, which is that his brother's name is Rex. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
His brother, you realize definitively that, the masked man is his brother. And then his brother is like, no, I don't deserve to go back to the family. I'm going to put myself into this penance where I'm, and it's really sad. And when you look at it with this lens of what they're trying to say with the movie, it's is this how they feel about it? Like they feel like they betrayed something, or they feel like once you cross a certain line, you don't get to go back into the fold. It just seems like such a, I don't want to say that it feels off, because that's the choice they made. That's the ending they chose to use. But it's interesting what it is saying, that his brother doesn't that. There is no scene where his brother walks up to them and takes off the mask and makes some gesture that proves that he's their brother, and then they all hug him, right? In most of the versions of this movie in the multiverse, that would be how this movie ended, and they chose to put him in this situation where it's tragic, and I just thought that was interesting and speaks to these ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and as I was watching it, I was thinking about that. Actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was thinking about how this is a very interesting choice, because the movie we end on this almost orgasmic celebration at the end, Speed getting across the finish line and winning, how the movie treats that, where it's doing quick cutting between people just screaming and him going down this tunnel and almost being reborn as this fully actualized person. It's cacophonous and it's just this wonderful, happy celebration. And yeah, you're right. Then we cut back to this guy who made a different choice, who walked away from this family. And we basically say, well, that's what you have to live with now. He says to himself, these are the consequences. I have to suffer the consequences of the choices I made. And it's a bummer. It is a bummer.
Yeah.
But I think it does kind of, to me, show, how much they value loyalty to family. You can't talk about this movie where family is everything and not talk about the fact that these two sisters make movies together. They have basically decided that their career is going to be spent creating art together. Every single one of their movies, I think, they have worked on together. They might have done some side projects working with other people, but they continue to come back and work together and create together. So it's really hard for me to not see the love of family as a celebration of each other, of a love towards each other in this creative process.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something worth talking about here, because there's not really any stuff with siblings in in the Matrix movies or
Yeah, yeah.
or in Bound. I mean, like, not that no one has siblings, but like it's not a focus. And I don't know, like personally, anything with siblings absolutely guts me. The Futurama episode with where it like follows Fry's brother back in time is like one of the two Futurama episodes that makes me, break down at the end. And just anything with siblings, and I think that happens when you have a sibling you're really close with.
Yeah.
And obviously they have siblings that they're really close with, each other. And so like, I think that may be one of the reasons why this is so beautiful, is at the core of this movie is this relationship between these brothers. And and there's a betrayal between them actually, and well, okay, that's it's more complicated than a betrayal, because he thinks his brother just died. Sort of. Actually, I forget exactly the dynamics of it, but
so Rex leaves home, quits the team, and what he's trying to do is fix racing. Like, he's going to go be the guy that fixes racing. And he's gotten wind of the corrupt nature of the sport, and he's going to fix it. And in doing so, he alienates himself from his family, and he ends up, dead, quote unquote, but he's faking his own death. That's what Rex does. And I think, you look at Racer X, which is Rex, which it's so obvious. I love just how obvious they played this reveal. Like, it's almost more surprising midway through the movie where they have him specifically say, "No, I am not your brother," because it's like so obvious that he is.
Right.
But I think the things Racer X says to him, the things he says, like that quote we started the podcast with, was like, "You don't get into this thing because you want to be a driver. You do it because you're driven." I think there's something to the effect of, you can't fix this. And if we extend this metaphor out to filmmaking, you can't make a movie and fix Hollywood. Like, that's not going to happen. But what you can do is just sit down and make a movie that make the movie you want to make, and be the director and the writer and the driver that you want to be. And I think what they were saying is, through Racer X and through Rex and his failure here was trying to fix a system and losing sight of why he was part of the system in the first place.
Yeah. Like leaving the family behind, trying to do it on his own.
Right.
And he's not strong enough to do it on his own. And Speed does it with the support of his family. And that's, I mean, that's the major thing you're supposed to walk away with. I mean, it does make me kind of wonder if the two of them ever come into conflict with each other, like,
oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, cause that's something that I don't think is necessarily being covered in this movie, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And it's not something we've talked about in context of the Wachowskis, is just like, when you're an iconic duo, there's gotta be some level of friction. There's got to be something in the dynamic that makes it ultimately work, but also, like, it's very difficult to imagine two people working on a creative project like consistently without disagreeing.
Yeah. Well, naturally, like, you, especially in art, you have a different way you see this. Like, no, we shouldn't do this line. We should do this line. No, we shouldn't cut here. We should cut there. Like, the angle should be from here. Like, there's 1,000 different decisions that go into this thing, and you're going to make mistakes. And the other thing is that I think this movie kind of touches on is how the public sees you. The opening 20 minutes of this movie, I think, is beautiful, and I actually want to spend some time and dive into, just like we did with The Matrix, I want to spend some time and dive into the opening of this movie and all the things it sets up and how it does that brilliantly and efficiently. But the end of the opening of this movie is he's about to beat his brother's record, and then he pulls back a little bit. And to me, that's, I think, their relationship. This idea that they're probably asked all the time, well, which one of you is the more creative, or which one came up with this concept? And like this compare between the two of them. Like, I think we see a unit naturally as human beings, and we want to kind of like identify each person's role within the unit and know, like, was this a Wachowskis film, or was this Alana, or was this more Lily? You know, like, I think we naturally want to do that. And I think one of the things they're exploring in this movie is, like, sometimes you got to lay off the throttle and let your sister have the record or something.
Yeah, I really like that because, you know, there has to be a level, and this is true, I think, even of friends, like real friends, but also close siblings, of course, is just like you have to have this, like love and mutual admiration and inspiration from each other. Like, I don't know, like for some reason jumping into my mind right now is this YouTube video I watched recently where it's this jiu-jitsu fighter and like instructor Eddie Bravo fighting the Wayne Gretzky of jiu-jitsu, basically, like the top guy. And I'll probably link it because it's pretty inspiring, but like, spoiler, Eddie Bravo wins, and afterward he's like weeping, and all he can say is like, I can't believe I won. He's a legend. And it's a weird, I guess it's like a weird example because they weren't actually friends, but the point is like that he beat this person that he was actually inspired by, and his reaction was not like, yeah, it was like, it was complicated, right? It's a very complicated thing when you're surpassing the people who inspire you, right? And you don't necessarily want to surpass the people who inspire you, because by definition you're taking that away from them. Rex had the record. If Speed takes the record, he has taken something away from his brother, and the memory of his brother. And yeah, I mean, you like that's I think that's the ongoing conflict between being driven to be the best and also, you know, being driven by the people that were the best. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. All right. Where were we? I lost track.
I think we've weaved around a bit, but like one thing that like the top thing on the stack for me is the visuals.
Yeah, we got to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Wachowskis are known for innovation, to put it mildly, in the visuals of movies, but like this is just a crazy whole other thing.
Yeah. Well, they basically decided that they weren't going to stay grounded in any kind of traditional film aesthetic. Mm-hmm. They were going to make their own thing, and they did that by basically green screen. Like the almost the entirety of the movie is computer graphics, with the exception of the actors. I think they were like even the cars are fully CG. They were sitting in like a basic rig that jostled them around. But it was just a bare rig, and they kind of layered the cars on top of them. So nothing in this movie except for the actors is real. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was it's a very interesting decision. It's a decision that alienated a bunch of people. A bunch of people were, I think, not ready for this type of movie and the look of this movie. It's very, very bright. It's very flashy. It doesn't look like anything else in the world. Like there's really no other movie that looks like this film. But I love it for that. I love it for it trying to push the envelope and redefine, you know, what we think of, you know, film aesthetic is.
Yeah. It looks kind of like a cartoon in the best possible way. Like, you know, the only thing that I can think of that reminds me of it, that might even be the wrong word, but like, you know, we're sitting here saying it's like nothing else, and I'm like, in a certain sense, it reminds me of like The Incredibles, where everything is kind of this like hyper reality. All the colors are really bright. Everything is kind of exaggerated. It's kind of these like, this like early 1900s aesthetic. But what's funny about that is that is literally a cartoon, but it's approaching the uncanny valley from the opposite direction. So like, it's just kind of a fun thought that like they're playing in this space of making things so hyper stylized that it's about as hyper stylized as you can go without literally being a cartoon. And you could argue it kind of is a cartoon if it is mostly CGI. Like the word cartoon ceases to mean anything when it's a composite and the only real things are the actors.
The weird part about this is how much, to me, the depressing part is what the general consensus and reaction to this style was. Because a lot of people were just like, this looks bad. Like it looks fake. And like it's supposed to look fake. It's not like that sky is not supposed to look like a real sky. The grass is not supposed to look like real grass. That was a choice they made. It's not like they just did a shitty job at like creating the CG.
Yeah.
Like it was an aesthetic choice, and it's one that they made. And I can see people not liking it, but I hate when people are just like, this was bad. This is bad.
Well, yeah, it's very, very boring to think that like now that we have the technology to make anything we can imagine appear on the screen, the goal should be to make everything look exactly the same way it would look if you shot it with a camera.
Yeah. And that's another thing this movie does. Because they're shooting in CG, the camera doesn't have to act like a camera. One of the most fascinating things to me and is we have all these animated CG movies we make now where we don't have to follow the rules of camera movements and things, and we do it anyway. Like most computer graphics movies, even some of the best Pixar movies, treat the camera as if it's a physical object in the space of the animation, and they move it as if it is such. This movie really doesn't do that. It just like it uses the fact that the camera is this nebulous thing that doesn't really exist to its fullest extent, and just kind of like it swings all over the place. It moves faster than a camera would ever actually be able to move. Like it switches from a wide shot to a close up, like via a zoom or via like what the closest approximation is like a dolly, but it's not, because it's moving like way too fast to actually be a dolly. And it does things like that all the time. And I think it's like, it's rewriting what filmmaking looks like. And I can't help but love it. I can't help but admire like their decision making in those moments.
Yeah, I agree. You know, just speaking generally about the reaction to it, I don't think I saw this in the theaters. I think I only ever saw it on a TV.
I didn't either, unfortunately.
And that's what's interesting to me is I can easily imagine, as much as I love this movie and as much as I will continue to praise the visual aesthetic, I can imagine this being like a sensory assault in a movie theater.
It is.
With a giant screen, with super, like everything moving super fast. The colors just like taking up your whole field of vision. Like I think it might be overwhelming in a movie theater. While it's not overwhelming when you're sitting on your couch watching it, because I don't know, it's quieter. It's a narrower part of your visual field. It's not quite so bright because you're in. I mean, these are minor things, but I can imagine having a different reaction to it in the movie theater versus in a home theater.
The thing that I think about it, and I don't disagree with you, but the thing that I think about it is, you know, it is sensory overload. There's a lot going on the screen, but to me, it always feels controlled in a way. Like it's not the kind of sensory overload that a Michael Bay Transformers movie is, where like it's just stuff. Like, yes, the screen is very packed, the frame is very packed with moving things and bright things, but it all has purpose behind it, and it all has control behind it, and there's a level of clarity to it. Like, I think they do a very good job of framing shots, so you always, even as hundreds of things are moving around, you're always very clear on what is the main focus of the frame. Like the car is put in the center, or we zoom into Speed's eye. There's a wonderful shot where at the end where two of the cars are battling, and like we do this ridiculous, impossible zoom from a wide shot to like a close up on Speed's eye, and I think that just like you get the movement, and so you like understand the things that are happening. I never was confused about what I was watching while watching this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I will say, like, for me, and maybe different people are different in this way, but like just like sometimes I want to watch something on a smaller screen or on a screen that I'm farther away from, because then like maybe my peripheral vision is unusually poor or something like that. But I just feel like if I were watching it on a giant screen, I would just like genuinely just be like, I can't follow what's happening. Even for a movie that does a good job, like I think I enjoyed Fury Road on a TV screen more than I enjoyed it on a movie screen for the same reason. And maybe I'm just
That's
weird.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, you are. I mean, to me, like it breaks my heart that I didn't see this movie in the theater, and I really wish I had. But like, I can understand what you mean by that. Like it is a big screen, and you can't, like, the thing about watching a movie on a big screen is your eyes cannot capture every inch of the frame at the same time like they can when you're watching it on a TV, even a big TV at home.
Yeah,
it's still different. Yeah.
None of this is meant as a criticism. It's more like kind of trying to explain like why it got the unfortunate reception it did. To understand it.
Well, and I think making aesthetic changes tends to turn people off. Like they shot a movie that looks different from what most movies are, and a lot of the common response to that is, ew, I don't like it. And I think what we've seen with Speed Racer is now it's been 10 years since this movie came out. We've seen a kind of critical reappreciation of the film. A lot of critics are now like starting to realize how, like, aesthetically how pleasing this movie was, storytelling wise, how good this movie was. Like, if you ask critics now, they're a lot more friendly to this movie than they were when it came out. And that's just kind of like what time does as you kind of absorb a movie. Yeah.
So I just want to flash back a minute to a comment you made about the intro to this movie being like perfect, like it's a perfect sequence. What's funny to me, and again, this is not a criticism, although it's going to maybe kind of sound like one, is that it's a very complex, intricate sequence involving like continuous jumps back and forth through time. I think I mentioned this to you before that I was watching this with my kids for the first time, and they can follow normal movies, like they have no trouble understanding the plot of things. But like they're watching this movie and they're asking questions, and I'm like, no, this is when he was a boy. Okay, no, that's his brother. Okay, now this is when he's a boy again. No, now this is him in the current time. And they're like, what does current time mean? And I'm like, okay. So like it is very sophisticated and like densely packed, right? And it works super well if you're like, an adult. It didn't necessarily occur to me before I showed it to them that like, oh yeah, this is a tightly wound little puzzle here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because this is like very clearly a movie made for children. Like there are like there's an entire character with his monkey sidekick that is a character created to make children like excited and laugh at silliness.
Yeah.
So I do agree that while I, as a 33-year-old man, can look at that intro and recognize, structurally all the incredible things they're doing, which they are doing a whole bunch. There's a whole lot of heavy lifting that those first 15 minutes does. I agree that like to the eyes of a child, it's like, what's going on here? And I think they try to draw the lines as easily as I can, as well as they can. Like I think the cuts transition pretty well.
Yeah.
once you've gotten the basic understanding of what they're doing. The transition back and forward in time, like you're guided through that visually and audibly with
right.
different visual cues and audio cues. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see a kid just not getting that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like when I took my grandpa to watch Face Off, and he just did not understand. Like, wait, he's the other guy, and then what? It's just like a mental block. You just if you don't get that core concept, the whole thing kind of breaks down.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you said, the film very quickly establishes the visual language of how it's doing these cuts back and forth through time. I think my kids are probably just too young, like not too young to appreciate the movie, but too young to appreciate that particular sequence. And
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
they'll probably get it pretty soon, honestly.
Yeah. Maybe we should spend some time on the sequence then, because we've kind of circled around it, but
Sure.
we haven't spoke
Yeah,
about it really specifically.
Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, this is a complicated movie. There's a lot of characters in this movie, and the way they've written the movie, all these characters matter. Like his mom, his dad, his girlfriend, his little brother, his older brother. All these characters are really important, and we need to establish their relationships. And I think that's what this introduction really does well, is quickly establish their relationships to each other. The movie opens on Speed sitting in the locker room. He's like tapping his foot nervously, and as the race starts, and then here's one of those audio and visual cues where we cut back to young Speed sitting in the classroom, and we do a match cut with the young Speed's shoe tapping. So we've kind of visually established these are the same people. Like, there we go. It's that simple. So we basically established he's been obsessed since he was a kid, and then we cut back and he's racing, and then we basically tell the story of Rex Racer through flashbacks, through just like these incredible actors' facial expressions, and then also we use this thing that the movie uses a lot, which is like left or right to left screen movement announcers that just kind of float across the frame, which is like, again, something that like you don't see very often. Like you see like in sports movies, you cut to the announcers all the time. That's a common thing to do in a sports film. You cut to the announcer saying something exciting, but that wasn't enough for them. They like, not only do they cut to the announcer, but they cut like in different ways. Like one announcer is moving across the frame, the other's like facing to the right and like moving a different direction, and it's just like these crazy movements. Like it's like they want things on the frame to be moving constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that also creates kind of a secondary effect where very often it'll be like Speed's face in the middle of the frame, or Speed's car maybe, and then the announcers are kind of talking at the car.
Right.
And like, so like in the shot, you are Speed and the announcers are like against you.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Like there's that's the feeling you get. That's the feeling I get anyway. Yeah, no, I love that. Like there's the motif of the announcers is just amazing. I agree. I never really thought about it until you mentioned it just now.
And it's not even that they're like that, like they're not important. Like the stuff that they're saying is important, and I think they drop a lot of exposition via the announcers, but I think they're stylistically more important than the words that they're saying are important.
Yeah.
And like there's so many of them. Some of them we see again, some of them we don't. I love that we get different reactions to them. We have some announcers that consider Rex like this holy, amazing racer. Like one of them says, wherever Rex is, he's looking down and happy. The others like, Rex Racer is a scumbag. He's the worst thing that happened to racing. And then like they sprinkle in announcers just in different languages to get an idea of the international nature of the sport, like how important and big this is. And it's all like shortcuts and tricks to relay information to you that you're not that's not has to be explicitly like doled out. It's just getting it to you. And that's like one thing I hinted at with like we establish each of the family members' relationship to both Rex and to Speed in this first 10-15 minutes by, you know, we cut back to a flashback of Pops yelling at Rex, and then we cut and then the camera moves to Susan Sarandon's character, and then we do another flashback from her perspective of watching Rex die. And it's like we could have just like carried that stuff out by cutting back and just putting one of the characters in the frame and thus implying like this is what they're thinking about in this moment.
Yeah.
You've connected relationship dots.
Yeah. This is the meaning of this scene that's happening right now, spread across all these characters. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's an amazing technique for visual storytelling.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. I agree that the intro sequence, like that's the thing. If you're not sold on watching this movie, just watch the first 20 minutes and then you'll love it and you'll finish the movie.
Right. That's exactly. And I do agree. Okay. Here's my one part where I'm going to let myself say something negative about this movie.
Okay.
I will agree that, like many movies, this movie has a second act problem. Yeah. I will agree that in the middle, this movie drags a little bit. As we're moving through our plot machinations and we're gearing up for the incredible third act,
Yeah.
I agree that the movie dips a little bit.
Yeah,
But
a little
yeah.
bit.
But I think the thing is, and I feel like I'm inadvertently using racing metaphors a lot here, but I think like the first 20 minutes like shoots you forward so fast that dip doesn't slow you down enough to where you just lose all momentum. Like it carries you. The amazingness of those first 20 minutes carries you through to the third act, where the movie picks up again and reaches those high highs again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's one race that didn't need to be in the movie, and during that race, you're actually like thinking like, this doesn't matter. Get back to the stuff that I was interested in,
right?
Which is actually not the worst thing that could happen, right? The worst thing that could happen is that you're like, I'm bored. Like you're not actually bored. You're frustrated.
Yeah,
which is a different kind of second act problem than the usual kind.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, and I kind of know exactly which race you mean too, which is the funny part. And like, even though I can fully acknowledge that each of these races are doing a narrative thing, like they have purpose behind them, but this is a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. This is a pretty long movie.
Yeah,
and yeah, I mean, I think that it does dig a little in the middle.
Yeah. So, we said we weren't going to focus on performances, and I think we shouldn't focus too much, but like, one thing directors do is, they direct the actors. They tell them how to be in the scenes, or give them guidance, give them pointers, make sure that everything is kind of a piece. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing, like one of my favorite things about this movie, honestly, is like literally every performance down to his little brother, the villain, obviously John Goodman, Speed, the girlfriend. I mean, I could just name every character. It's like exactly nailing the exact tone and embodying like a sophisticated and nuanced character, even if they're like this silly little brother character.
Yeah.
It's like it's more than you expect from a movie like this.
I completely agree. And to me, it's one of those things that is like, it looks so much easier than it was, because I think the tone of this movie, the line that this movie skates between, being just a farce of ridiculous, silly humor and drama, like the ability to pull off, for a single actor to pull off both of those things throughout the movie is challenging. And you have to make sure that you're hitting those beats right. And everyone does it. Like you have a moment where John Goodman, who is one of the greatest actors of all time, and I think he's like continually like under appreciated. He's a moment where he's like being a Greco-Roman wrestler and like slamming people on the ground and being ridiculous. And then there's a moment where he's sitting down and telling his son, it's my fault my son died because I let him go, because I let him think that this company was more important than my love for him, and I'm not going to make that same mistake with you. You can leave this house, you can yell at me, you can betray this family, whatever, and you will always be welcome here because I love you. And for the same character to do those same things and for it to feel believable on both ends of that spectrum is remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's not just John Goodman doing it. You're right. It's every single one. It's Susan Sarandon, another fantastic actress, doing it. Emile Hirsch, who is not the best actor in the world, but I think out of all the characters in this movie, he has the least amount of range because he's like the golden child, wonderful one. But he does fantastic here. We're seeing in Trixie. Why am I blanking? Christina Ricci getting to play like a very happy, wonderful, but also like amazing character. Like, she's not just the sidekick. Like, I love them all.
Yeah.
And I guess we got to talk, like, I want to talk about the bad guy because he's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I was worried for a second you were going to say you didn't like it, and I would have been very confused.
No.
No, like the scenery chewingness of him is like one of the most perfect elements, where he's not just like being a ridiculous, overacting villain type. Like it's also believable, like realistic, but also also cartoonish. Like it's almost sounds like a contradiction. And it's like, Matt, what are you talking about? Like you can't have realistic but also cartoonish. It's like, yeah, it's both. Where the two elements are needed, it's both of them.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like he comes on board as this like, overly friendly, like promising you the world guy. And I love the heel turn as soon as Speed says no to the contract. Like I love how that whole scene plays out. His performance, like the lighting almost changes. Like the whole movie like pivots around Royalton suddenly like dropping the act and becoming this terrible guy. And like oh, it's so good. Like the rhythm of the scene picks up. Like it was this like relaxed like conversation. And all of a sudden Royalton's like speaking really fast and forcefully. And oh, it's so good. I don't know how much this movie would have worked if there was someone not as talented in this role, because you need him as the cartoony bad guy that also like can be intimidating while at the same time being silly.
Right. Yeah. The word I was going to go for is like menacing. Like,
yeah, that's
like
perfect.
He's a cartoon, but you're genuinely, like you said, the heel turn is a fantastic film moment where you're just like kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
With everything about it. And yeah.
You know what I love about it? I was thinking about this. It's almost as if the movie recognizes you're going to be uncomfortable with the heel turn, because it keeps cutting back to the monkey and Spritle.
Yeah.
Like just having fun and like eating candy and goofing off in the world. Like it's like it leaves the scene because it like knows you need to like emotionally prepared for this.
Yeah.
So it cuts away from it. And at first I was like, when I was first thinking about it, I was like, why do they like kind of stall the dramatic momentum of the scene by cutting away to this silly cartoony bit? And I think that's why. It's because like if they hit you with this all at once without allowing you a break from it, it would have been too much.
Yeah, it would have kind of derailed the overall tone thing.
Yeah.
It's a very like subtle kind of tone target that they're aiming for, where it's you definitely are like standing up out of your seat and fist pumping when he crosses that finish line in the end, and you don't feel that level of commitment and investment and emotion in a movie that's just a silly farce.
Right.
Like there are lots of movies that are silly farces, and you're like, haha, yay, they won. The good guys won in the end, yay, and then you don't think about the movie ever again. But like this one is both. It's both a really good sports movie and like a successful kind of like silly, enjoyable romp, right? I don't know if I would call it a comedy necessarily, but it's definitely got elements where you're chuckling at all the right times.
Well, and the thing that I like about it, about that ending, talking about the ending, is like the third act, Speed's goal at the end of the movie is just to race. Like he's gonna win because he's Speed Racer, but like there's not like a overly complicated underlying plot to take down Royalton. Like he has no idea that by crossing the finish line he's gonna spoil Royalton's plan. Like he's just like trying to renew the idea of competition to the Grand Prix, and then like the opportunity arises to take down Royalton by exposing the cheating with the hook, the car hook thingy.
Yeah.
But that was never like the goal. So it's almost as if like Royalton being taken down is a secondary benefit to the fact that Speed, like fulfilled his destiny or like recognized the reason for why he was doing this thing. And I think the movie almost reflects that, because like the newspaper shot we see, like the big front page is like Racer Motors wins, Speed Racer wins, and then in the bottom right hand corner it's like Royalton indicted.
Yeah.
Like that's a secondary accomplishment to the main one, which was he did it. He's actualized. He knows why he does this, and he accomplished his objectives.
Yeah. I mean, I have a huge soft spot for any story where like the conclusion is like the good guy wins through sheer integrity,
right?
Which is exactly what this is, where you're like, and the movie is convincingly set up against him, where you're like, man, I don't know if he's gonna make it. Like he's gotta come up with something clever. He's gotta or make a compromise somewhere. And it's like he's like, no, none of that. Like, and even his own family are like, we got to think of a way, to solve this. And he's like, the way I'm gonna solve this is I'm just gonna be true to what I want out of this.
Yeah, you can't change the world by driving a car. And his response is, maybe not, but it's the only thing I know how to do. And I mean, going back to our metaphor, you can't change the world by making a movie, but it's the thing I know how to do. So I'm going to do it to the best of my ability and hope that it accomplishes something.
Yeah.
And in the end of the movie, it does.
Yeah.
And it's never the main goal like winning a race doesn't, like, changing the world is never your main goal of winning the race. Like, and I think that's what the difference between Rex and Speed are. Like, Rex set out to change racing. At the end of this movie, Speed just gets in that car to win, to drive, to win the race, and that's it. And I think what they're saying through the metaphor is they're like, you shouldn't set out to make a movie that's going to change the world. You should just make the best movie you can, and hopefully it'll change the world.
Yeah, my head is exploding because that's what this movie is. Like you can imagine someone saying like, why are you insisting on making this movie so weird? Just make a normal movie. You're not, you can't change filmmaking by making a single movie. And then replying, my goal isn't to change filmmaking, but I'm going to make this movie the way I want to make it. And it's going to be good. And, they were right.
And that is something I admire so much about the Wachowskis, their ability to do that and to just not be afraid with it. And the thing that I love about this, you could look at this movie and say, they were frustrated with the Hollywood system. They made this movie that's very critical to big corporate conglomerates and that the exact people that produced this movie, the exact people that allowed this movie to be made are the people they're frustrated with. So they made this almost act of protest movie, and it didn't do well. It failed. And you could see a person like that be discouraged and say, well, shit, I got in my car, I drove the best I could, and it didn't matter. But then the movie they made after this is Cloud Atlas, which is another movie that's like fucking batshit insane. And it's just like them doing whatever they wanted to do. They fully embraced another different style of filmmaking that is not the usual. So like, I love Speed Racer, and I love that people are starting to love Speed Racer, and I love that they made the movie they wanted to make. But more than all of that, I love that the fact that this movie failed didn't change them as people, which is exactly what this movie is about. Like you can't let racing change you. Like you can't let this business change who you are. And I love that could have happened with this movie, but I love to think that they were sitting here looking at the reviews come in, looking at the numbers come in, and want to be discouraged, and then just be like, no, remember the story we told, remember the point of what we told, and allowed them to move on and continue to create things.
Yeah, I agree. It's beautiful because, I mean, it seems like it's pretty common that directors become increasingly kind of avant-garde and then kind of at some point give up and become, I don't know, they just want to stamp out another movie. I can think of a few.
They want to be safe. I mean, you want people to like the things that you do, right? Like, like as much as, you're going to go in there and you're going to try to make the movie that you want to make and make it the best to your ability. You still want people at the end of the day to go, hey, that was good. I liked that.
Yeah.
And we're entering the phase of their career in this marathon where we don't get as much of that. Like they started off very high, and most people from this point out are just kind of like, the Wachowskis have lost something. And whether or not you think that's true or not, the one thing you can say is that they continue to make the movies that they want to make.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that makes me happy, even if I'm less enthusiastic about, I guess, most of the movies after this one.
Yeah.
But although I still haven't seen Jupiter Ascending, which obviously going to watch that before we do the episode.
Yeah, you're not gonna love it, I don't think. I don't love it. I like it a lot. I like it for what it is, which is a weird as shit science fiction movie that like revels in being weird. But I very much loved Cloud Atlas. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. Obviously not as much as Speed Racer. I will never love anything as much as Speed Racer, but
Yeah.
I think we're getting near the end of our conversation here, and I hope I've kind of maybe laid out why, like, the reasons why this movie matters so much to me.
Yeah.
And it's a combination of everything. It's a combination of what I think the movie is saying, and then what the movie's doing, and just the boldness with which they made this film. I just like it's everything, and all that coming together. And it just roars across the finish line, and I cheer.
Yeah, I think you did nail it down pretty well in this discussion. And one thing I'll say is, like, our previous discussion about Speed Racer, you were basically kind of hamstrung because you're trying to persuade. Whereas right now you're just laying out very carefully, and I think and we just had more time to kind of go into it. So I think that. I think we did a good job here. One thing, like, speaking of themes, is like we noted on the previous 4 episodes, right, of the Wachowski Marathon, that they consistently have this theme of what could be viewed narrowly as a trans metaphor that is inflected in a lot of different ways, and what could also be viewed more broadly as a not fitting into society and having to make your own way metaphor. But what's interesting is I don't really see that in this movie, other than the sense in which, like, Speed Racer, he's like the best. Yeah. And like that is a kind of alienation, but I don't get the sense that he struggles too much with it. Maybe I'm not, this is just a comment saying, like, I think it's interesting and shows maybe a bit of development that for this movie they had the confidence to just attack in a completely separate set of themes and not really try to work in the theme that they were exploring for the previous films.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I was just kind of like running through the movie in my head real quick to see if there's anything specific to that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there definitely is like not specific themes of female empowerment, but there is not really a different gender divide here. Like, none of the female characters in the movie are relegated to certain roles. Like, that's one thing I love about the very end of the movie when they're building the car, is each and every one of them is building the car. Like, every character in the movie is involved in that process. I love that Trixie is better than most of the drivers out there, and she's involved, and she's got her own helicopter too. So I think the movie does not slide into normal gender roles in any kind of way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I agree that the societal outcast theme is not as prevalent here,
right?
For obvious reasons, because that's not the thing that they wanted to approach with this.
Yeah. I mean, I was just kind of commenting we're speaking about them as directors, and there are certainly different themes they're interested in, and I think it's really fun when they're able to make a movie that's just wildly different from the other movies that they've made, because they're just hey, we have this whole other set of things we're interested in talking about, and that's great. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that makes you look forward to more movies from them, because you're hey, what else do you have to say? What other new things do you have to say? Because you're really good at saying things with your movies.
Yeah, I also wonder. Yeah, I'm trying to remember when they actually came out as transgender. I think it was definitely after this, because I know the film still says the Wachowski brothers as it concludes. But I wonder, as they move towards existing as their true selves, if they are they are less concerned with this role as the outcast people, as they come to have come to have better acceptance of themselves, as they go through this process, if that's something they feel much more confident in, and so they don't dip in that well as much. I say that, but I know that their television show Sense8 very much has to deal with identity and searching for that kind of stuff. So
it's plausible. It's plausible to me, just because I've seen a lot of musicians who I've kind of aged with these musicians, and I note that particular artists may have had a lot of anger in their music when they were 25, 20, and now they're 35 or 40 or 45, and it's not the same. It's not the same. They're not thinking about the same things. They're not struggling with the same things. So it makes sense. Makes sense that it would change over time for anyone. Anyone who's doing art is gonna evolve. And but yeah, no, I mean, it's also something that I can imagine them thinking about a lot.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah.
So
I just looked it up because I was curious. Lana completed her transition like right after Speed Racer. So it was like right after this movie that she completed. But there were rumors all throughout the 2000s. So yeah, I wonder as like you start to you know like know who you are and are starting to become like where you're able to state publicly who you are, that you delve into those themes less often.
Yeah, or the themes themselves and your relationship to them just evolves, and you're saying you're now saying different things about it.
Yeah. And that makes me like, I think we're going to try to cover Sense8 on this thing somehow. I know it's a very long show, so I'm probably not going to watch the entire show, but I would like to talk about Sense8 because that's the last thing that they've done.
Yeah.
And it's a show I've always wanted to watch and just haven't gotten around to it. But I that's why I love this process. I love kind of seeing their growth and seeing the people they've changed into and how that's reflected in the art that they create. I love this process so much, and I love that we get to spend like a whole episode doing one movie at a time instead of rushing it all into like a 45-minute conversation. That's why I love that we've changed this format.
Yeah, me too. Like, I admit that sometimes I'm like, how much can you really talk about a single director or a pair of directors? And the answer continues to be more than you would think.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so I think that's going to wrap up our conversation of Speed Racer, unless you had anything else you wanted to talk about. If you haven't seen this movie, well, we spoiled it for you, but that doesn't matter. The movie's an experience, and give it a shot. I strongly suggest you give it a shot. It's on Netflix right now for free, so if you have a Netflix subscription, you can check it out.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah, I agree that this is not a movie where spoilers are going to harm you too much.
No, yeah.
Doof.
All right. Had a couple things I wanted to talk about, Matt, before we go.
All right.
I needed to talk about Spider-Man, and I needed to talk about Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse because it's a movie that came out last weekend, and it's kind of been bigger than everyone thought it was going to be. It's funny because it's bigger than I thought it was going to be, because when we were doing like our 2018 movie preview, I remember very specifically I saw this movie and then like brushed it off as just being like, oh, it's an animated Spider-Man thing. I'm not going to cover that. And someone commented on our podcast episode and it's like, why didn't you talk about Into the Spider-Verse? And I was like, because that's a Sony animated pictures thing. This is like one of the best Spider-Man stories ever, Matt. This is like, it's really, really, really good. And you and I think, are both on the same page as far as Spider-Man 2 being like one of the best superhero movies ever. And I don't think this dethrones that for me, but it gets damn close. And it's doing like, it's hard to talk about it without spoiling things, but the basic concept of this, for those that don't know, is that Spider-Man, as played by Miles Morales, is like a rip in the multiverse happens, and all these different Spider-Mans are coming to Miles Morales' universe, and they have to work together to defeat the Kingpin and get everyone home to their universes. But it's also about like, becoming comfortable with who you are, finding that person, identifying yourself. Like there's a lot of core themes of identity and making changes and it's so wonderful and funny, and I loved it so much.
Yeah, I really can't wait to see it. I think I might even see it as soon as this weekend. If not this weekend, definitely during the Christmas break next week.
That's great. I think we should try to have a conversation about it, a detailed conversation about it, because I think it's one of those movies that you really can have a detailed conversation about. Cool. It does things like, it was so funny. We were talking about Speed Racer and the things that Speed Racer does with filmmaking and animation and CG. And while I was saying that, I was thinking of Into the Spider-Verse, because I think this movie does very similar things. First of all, it animates on twos, which is a really like weird way to just say that instead of it animating every single frame in the movie, it animates every other frame in the movie, which just means that instead of looking like the movie is running at 24 frames per second, it's actually running at 12 frames per second, which it's just an illusion to create like less fluid motion, which makes it look more comic booky. Like you can tell one of the things they set out to do in this movie is make it look as much like a comic book as possible. And they did that through like all the little dots that you see. There's a term for them, but I don't know it. But like we have it in our logo, right? The little dots and that texture is all over the characters. It's all over the settings. There's like pop-up words for Miles Morales. Like when Miles Morales first gets his spider sense, like it pops up in like words on the screen. And we hear it too, but it's also popping up like a comic book. Like there's so many different visual choices. Each one of the spider people are animated differently because one of them's like from an anime, so they're animated like an anime. One of them is like a Looney Tune, so it looks literally like a Looney Tune. There's like Spider-Man Noir, who's black and white, and he's animated that way. And it's just like the attention to detail with all that stuff, the things that it's doing with like kind of how Speed Racer was ignoring the fact that you had to have a camera that was doing moves that were physically possible. I think Into the Spider-Verse does the same thing, where the camera is just going nuts and doing whatever it wants to do, and the animators felt unmoored to any kind of consistent animation style, which gives the whole thing this otherworldly comic book type feel, and it just works. It just works so well.
That's awesome. I mean, obviously, I love Spider-Man, and what you're saying about the visuals, I just can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, I think you will really enjoy it. All the voice actors are fantastic as well. So.
Do you see any reason why I shouldn't be able to bring like a couple of kids to see it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's some heavy stuff in it, like some characters don't live.
Okay. Okay.
But nothing, like it's not like
no graphic violence.
No, there's no like it. The ending is very intense. Like almost like it was almost pushing me to my level of like, okay, this is just too much. Like it's very like neon and it's very Speed Racer actually,
okay.
But almost more so. The very end, just like because like the Spider-Mans don't have to deal with gravity.
Yeah.
Like there's no like gravity is irrelevant to them, so they can just climb on anything and do anything. So then the camera becomes completely unmoored to any kind of sense of gravity near the end of the movie, and just like is spinning and moving and I mean it's fantastic, but it is a lot. So maybe your kids will get a little dizzy. I've heard of people kind of getting sick coming out of this movie, so I would just like make sure that it's not like too much for them.
Okay.
But other than that, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. If you like comic books, if you like Spider-Man, if you just like movies, I think you're going to find something to enjoy in this movie. And I love it because like we have so many damn comic book movies now, Matt. We had so many that came out this year, and I still keep finding ones that find a way to do something new in the genre and something interesting and keep me wanting to come back for more movies.
Yeah.
It's really exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. One final thing before we go for the year, Matt. The year's over. 2018 is over.
Yeah. It lasted so long. It lasted so many years.
I know. Did you know Black Panther came out this year?
Normally, isn't it more normal to say like, oh, it was so fast, just flew by? Like, I feel like that's how the last like 10 years have been. But then 2018 was like yeah.
The weird thing to me is I think the days move by really fast, but the year feels like it's been going on forever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean it does. Just if you like list off things that happened this year, you're like, this year was 10 years long.
Yeah. Anyway, so it was a big year for us. Obviously, we had a whole rebrand back at the end of summer where we became Doof Media. We kind of relaunched this show right here in particular, and started, wanting to dive deep into specific movies and do less like new movie review stuff. We used to do pretty exclusively just, hey, a new movie came out, let's talk about it. We've kind of stepped back from doing that, with the exception of the little mini review I just did. But it was a year of changes for us. A lot of stuff happened, and we're going to carry that into next year. And one of the things we are doing on all our shows as we wrap this up is ask for feedback from you guys. We want to know, what do you think of the Doofcast as it stands? Do you like the changes that we've done with it? Do you like the new things we're doing? We're trying to spend a lot of time covering things that our patrons want us to, because we've got this long list, but we're also doing things like the unlikable protagonists episode. We're doing things like the Deconstructing series like this. I've got some show ideas coming in the future. Like, do you like the direction we're taking? What do you like about it? What do you want to see more of? What do you wish we did more of? If we stopped doing a certain thing and you wish we would do it again, what is that? And so we're just reaching out and asking you guys to let us know what you think, so we can continue to evolve and change and improve.
Yeah, well said. I don't have anything to add to that.
All right, so that's it. And that's all we had for you guys this year. If you have opinions on anything we talked about, if you want to talk about Speed Racer, if you really didn't like Speed Racer, I kind of want to know. I kind of want to hear why. I want. Like, I'm not going to get mad at you for not liking the movie or anything. I just want to hear, like, if the movie didn't work for you, which is fine. Let me know why. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And you can find this and all of our shows over at doofmedia.com. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. We just hit our big goal last week, and we're starting our video game streaming service, Doof Plays, where we're going to be kind of exploring storytelling in video games and doing some co-op stuff and doing a StarCraft tournament. So we're doing all kinds of fun stuff there, so you can check out that and help out with that by becoming a patron. You can go to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge $1 a month or whatever else you can afford.
Yeah. Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Every review helps us get more exposure, and it introduces new people to the content that we make here. So we really appreciate it if you go over and do that.
Yes, thank you guys. And we will see you all in 2019. And our first episode of 2019, Matt,
What's that?
we'll be saying goodbye to 2018.
Okay.
We originally were supposed to do our wrap-up episode this week, but I thought we'd delay that by a couple weeks and give people some more times to see a few more movies as we wrap up the year, so we can really look back at the year as a whole with all those movies under our belt. So we're going to wait and do that in the first week of 2019, I think it is. Sure. Yeah. Not next week, the week after. Yeah, that's the one.
All right.
We'll see you guys then. Merry Christmas,
Merry Christmas.
and Happy New Year.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.